Good morning, everyone. So, Allied, brand new story. We just started trading about 8 days ago on the CSE, and we started trading actually this morning on the Frankfurt exchange. So this is a brand new story. It's a European story focused on the two existing Portuguese tungsten deposits at Borralha and Vila Verde. Tungsten, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a critical metal with uses in both industry and military because of its unique characteristics of being the hardest, densest, heaviest metal with the highest melting point. Makes it particularly valuable for military purposes, both ballistic and for armaments. The reason it is such a critical metal is because at the moment 85% of all tungsten is coming from China. If you add the supply from Russia and North Korea, you're well over 90%. So the West, whether it's North America, where there is no current tungsten production, although North America is its largest market, or Europe, where there is very limited tungsten production, that vulnerability, both militarily and economically, makes it crucial for Europe and North America to develop its own supplies of tungsten. The tungsten coming from Portugal, which traditionally was a very important supplier of tungsten, is recognized as some of the best tungsten in the world. It is principally a wolframite deposit as opposed to scheelite, which is the most abundant form of the mineralization in the West, is important because it's easier to process. This is a mechanical process for making a tungsten concentrate. And in our two existing tungsten projects in northern Portugal, we have a lot of advantages that we don't see in other proposed tungsten mine. First of all, the infrastructure in Portugal is second to none. It's already in place. We're about a 30-minute drive from Borralha, the third largest city in Portugal, and about a 60-minute drive from the port in Porto. There's a very extensive hydroelectricity dam system just a few kilometers away from where we're situated in a historical mining district where just about every family in the local villages once worked in this mine and is familiar with the process for mining tungsten, which they recognize as being environmentally very friendly, as it only involves mechanical, no chemical processing. The uses of tungsten are broad and important and crucial. I would tell you what drives the price of tungsten is those military uses, but over 30% of those uses are in manufacturing because of its characteristic and use in tungsten carbide tools. Anytime you are cutting any type of metal, you're using a tungsten carbide tool to do it. So the pricing of tungsten over the years has been relatively low, but what we've seen recently because of the trade wars that are developing between America and China as China weaponizes its critical metals as a negotiating tactic, It has been cutting off the supply of tungsten to the west, which drives up the prices. As the number of military conflicts that occur over the years have been increasing, it increases the use of tungsten as well. And we've seen, as a result, a real challenge to the supply of tungsten to the west. Government policies as well have tightened that. The EU in particular is trying to become more autonomous in terms of its critical metals. The US Department of Defense, under its Reshore Act, has said by 2027 that any supply of any materials that includes tungsten that it purchases, that tungsten has to be sourced from a Western source of tungsten, of which there are at the moment very few. So we've spent about $4 million as a private company bringing the existing property of Borralha up to a current resource. It is a very well-known tungsten deposit. One time it was the largest tungsten mine in Portugal. We are starting another campaign right now. We believe we're going to be able to double the size of our current resource estimate between now and the end of July. And the same is true on Vila Verde, which contains the Verde mine, which was once the third largest mine in Portugal. We believe, in fact, it represents a much larger blue sky than Borralha, and we believe the two together will probably be the most important tungsten deposit outside of China. Because we know that the nature of the tungsten in northern Portugal is easy to process, we can move very quickly to creating revenues through putting a pilot plant in place at Vila Verde. We're already permitted on both sites for 150,000 tons of mineralized ore. And we already have in place with Global Tungsten Powder, who operates the largest tungsten smelter outside of China, an LOI for offtake. We're going to put a pilot plant in place to create an immediate revenue stream, but more importantly also to decrease the risk associated with scaling up and building a larger facility for full-size industrial production. As I've said, we've spent about $4 million as a private company getting our current resource estimate. We just listed. We're starting right now that second exploration campaign to double our resource estimate. We're going to be putting in place that smaller pilot plant probably by the end of September. We'll have our pre-feasibility study done as we move forward towards the idea of putting a larger plant in place at Borralha. As mentioned, we have over 100 million shares issued already. Most of those are under some form of escrow. All founder shares are completely escrowed for 2 years. All vendor shares are escrowed completely for 2 years. All of the shares issued before our concurrent financing for our going public transaction, all of those are under a 3-year escrow. So the only shares that are really freely trading at the moment are the ones that we just did concurrent with our going public transaction. So the actual effective float is actually quite limited. Management owns about 15% of the company, institutions 25%. So we're aligned with our shareholders and their vision of seeing of them benefiting from an increasing share price. I should mention one of the advantages that we have in Portugal is we have a great team of geologists and mining engineers that we're working with in the city of Braga. It's a big advantage to have a group of people that are focused on tungsten and have studied it for their lives, and also are very familiar with the mine and the community. It makes both the permitting and the relations with the local community much easier. So really, that's the whole thing. I guess we have time for some questions, if there's any.
We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question? We've got one here.
Yes, I'm aware that I noticed you have links with the United States there, and there has been some grant-based funding that the Americans have been offering to secure metals. I think first tellurium, maybe have got some access to funding through this.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you could position yourself to get exposure to this possible type of grant-based funding from the United States in return for them securing this particular metal?
Yes, I think so. Northcliffe, actually, which is another very early stage tungsten explorer, I think was funded by DOD last week. Also, there's another project in northern Canada, in the Yukon, that was also funded by DOD. So we are positioning ourselves to do that, both in terms of with the US government, but also with the EU. We're in the process of becoming a project of national interest in Portugal, which would give us easier access to funding from the EU, as well as expedite the whole permitting process. It's my view that the government money tends to take longer than private money. So the idea is to do this privately, but if we can benefit from public money, which I expect to have a longer timeline on it, and probably come with a higher level of accounting that we'd have to jump through in terms of what they would expect before dispersing, then that would obviously be something we want to see.
This project, seeing this material depends on the premise that the tension with China will keep being. But what happens if they go down? I mean, what is your cost structure? How it compares with the Chinese producer? Is 10% more or 50% more?
Yeah, well, I think it's made it to the top of the news cycle because of the tension with the Chinese, but I think the idea of being autonomous in raw materials is something that's fundamentally changed. I think we've moved away from the 1980s vision of worldwide free trade into these trading blocks, and I don't think that's going to change regardless of the negotiations between the US and China. I think as well, if you're looking at what's going on in NATO, for example, where there's going to be this higher level of autonomy and countries spending 5% of their GDP on military equipment, that's also something that's going to drive the demand for tungsten. As I said, 30% of it is for industrial uses. If you believe that America, for example, is going to reindustrialize, then there's a whole level of tungsten usage that's going to come from that as well.
It means that you are not competing with Chinese if there is an open market.
No, I think we are competitive. We have a very low cost. We don't have any infrastructure that we need to put in place at all. I mean, the roads are there, the power lines are there. I would argue that we are as low cost as the Chinese because of what's already been done in northern Portugal. The reason those mines shut, they were shut because the Chinese drove the price way down in the mid-1980s. It's not because it's not for any other reason for that. But also, if you look at like the Reshore Act, regardless of what the Chinese do, if they're only going to buy tungsten from the West, the Chinese can lower their prices to a penny, but it doesn't help their suppliers in terms of being able to sell, to the trillion-dollar military complex in the U.S.
Have to finish the rest of it during the coffee break.
Thank you.
We have coffee break now.